It's really my pleasure to actually introduce the winner of the 2020 Aramco Trading News Road CEO of the Year in the category of refining, to Ibu Nike Widiawati, the President, Director, and Chief Executive Officer of PT Pertamina. Ibu Nike, she became the President, Director, and CEO of Pertamina, the Indonesia state-owned energy company, in August 2018. Ibu Nike oversees an enterprise with more than $55 billion in annual revenue and some 32,000 employees around the world. In her 2 years at helm of the company, Ibu Nike has committed significant investment for the next 5 years in an ambitious vision to ensure availability, accessibility, affordability, acceptability, and sustainability of energy in Indonesia. To increase reserves, Pertamina had recently completed the seismic survey of an area stretching over 30,000 kilometers into the 3 basins. I think this is the longest survey ever conducted in Southeast Asia for the last 10 years. She has also boosted the evolution of the refining and petrochemical subsidiaries by targeting a daily refining capacity of 2 billion barrels per day and petrochemical capacity of 12 million tons per annum. Ibu Nike Widiawati has also recently been named as one of the 50 Fortune Most Powerful Women International 2020. With a strong courage and long-term vision, she's responsible in leading the transformation of Pertamina. Ibu Nike is also known to be an optimistic person that believes that all difficulties can be turned into opportunities in order to move forward towards a better future. All that remains for me is to say that Ibu Nike Widiawati is a very deserving recipient of this year's award in the refining category. Congratulations, Ibu Nike.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mahmood, for that introduction and presentation. Unfortunately, Ms. Widiawati could not join us today, but Mr. Iman Rahman, Director of Strategy, Portfolio and New Ventures from Pertamina, will be accepting the award on her behalf. So, Mr. Rahman, if you could please switch on your video and your microphone. Welcome and congratulations.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Mahmood. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Ibu Nike, I would like to send a sincere gratitude for attending this webinar today. And I'm truly honored to present Ibu Nike Widiawati, our CEO of Pertamina, to receive this award, the Aramco Trading News Road CEO of the Year Award 2020 in the category of energy refining. This award is the result of the Pertamina employee hard work. In 2020, all of us, including Pertamina, was affected by the triple shock due to the COVID-19 pandemic, namely a decrease in the world crude oil price, a decrease in domestic fuel consumption, and a movement in a dollar exchange rate. But all business lines continue to move toward completing in 2020 target. It is our aspiration to become a global leading energy company in a market value of $100 billion. The refinery that we have today, as well as development program, are our commitment to fulfill the task mandated by the government and also to focus on boosting the construction of petrochemical refineries. Pertamina is currently moving to implement the environmental, social, and government or ESG framework comprehensively by developing green refinery and addressing the use of new renewable energy. Thank you, Diala.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rahman, and congratulations once more to Ms. Widiawati and to Pertamina. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And please do continue to join us as a listener in on this forum. But I would like you now to switch off your video. Thank you very much, and unmute your microphone. Thank you very much. Mr. Arif, you can stay with us because you're going to be joining us on the next panel session. And I'm delighted to introduce that. I'd like to invite Sean Evers, who is the managing partner of Gulf Intelligence, who will be moderating the Aramco Trading International panel. And Sean, I'm going to now hand over to you if your video is on. And
Yes.
welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diala, and congratulations to Ms. Widiawati. Unfortunately, she had to cancel this morning. And welcome to the stage our other panelists who are all members of the selection committee and other winners. So Arif, thank you. I'd like to also welcome to the stage Ms. Quah Hoon, Chief Executive of the Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore, to also turn on her camera and sound, and Mr. Roger Chia Kim Piow, the Chairman and Managing Director of Rotary Group of Companies. Roger, welcome. And Mr. Mike Muller, President and CEO of Vitol Asia. If you would, please, gentlemen, also turn on your cameras and your microphones, and we can commence this panel discussion. Thank you, Roger.
Hi, thank you.
And Mike, is Mike joining us?
I am with you, but it is telling
Okay.
me the host is going to enable the video. Ah,
Okay, there you go. Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And welcome to everybody to join this important session on this January 13th as we take an outlook for the year ahead, the outlook for Asia economic growth and energy demand in 2021. A fairly comprehensive headline, I acknowledge, but that's the nature of the beginning of every year, where we can take a moment to sort of have a very big picture, holistic view of where the direction of travel may be in these coming months. I want to kick off by inviting each of our speakers to sort of give their 2 minutes sort of State of the Union's sort of view on the topic. I'll commence by inviting Ms. Hoon to start and to give us her thoughts on the outlook for Asia in the coming 12 months. Please.
Thank you, Sean, and thanks to Gulf Intelligence for inviting me to take part in this very distinguished panel. Now, on the topic of the outlook for global as well as Asian economic growth and energy demand, I would like to focus a little bit more on the economic side because that's where I'm a bit more specialist, and I think Arif, Roger, and Mike probably has more insight into the energy demand. Now, on the global outlook, with COVID-19 last year, it took a hit in terms of economy. There is some hope that we can start to see signs of recovery with the development, distribution of vaccine. Hopefully, we see the gradual reopening of economies and businesses. So if you look at what some of the predictions by, say, for example, IMF, World Bank, OECD, they do forecast that the global economy could rebound by about 4 to 5% in 2021. Then I take a look at some of the forecasts, for example, for Asia. For Asia, I'm a bit cautiously optimistic about the outlook. IMF does expect the real GDP growth for Asia as a whole to hover around 7% in 2021. It will be the highest among all the regions. And in this case, what we read is that China is expected to continue to take the lead in terms of the recovery in the region and globally. Of course, this predictions and projections come with depending on the factors, right? We definitely it all will have to depend to see how whether we are indeed seeing a U-shaped curve in terms of recovery from COVID itself, whether countries are able to continue to contain the situation, and also the successful rollout of the vaccine on how it can help to contain the spread as well. So there are derailing factors. But overall, I think in terms of Asia economic growth, we are cautiously optimistic.
Thank you, Ms. Hoon, for your opening comments. Cautiously optimistic. Let's bring in Mr. Roger Piow of the Rotary Group. Roger, are you cautiously optimistic, or what is your outlook for the year ahead? We welcome your opening thoughts.
Definitely, I'm very concerned about this year. Well, 2021 will be a year of transition, but also opportunities in the energy market. Then the pandemic has accelerated our adoption of technologies, and all of us have to manage our business in this new normal. Increasingly, there has been a focus shift into newer power, either through low carbon fuel, LNG, solar, and other means. This transition fuel will help bridge the gap between fossil and carbon-free fuels. We see continued demand in pockets within South Asia, namely Myanmar and Vietnam, for transitional fuel. However, for countries like Singapore, Thailand, and Malaysia, the LNG market is growing exponentially. In our efforts to reduce carbon emissions, Singapore is now one of the first countries in South Asia also to introduce a carbon tax. The concerted shift towards a net zero carbon economy will be a reality of all stakeholders in the near future. And this shift is happening throughout our own ecosystem. The construction we are adopting now, new technologies and processes to meet the demand of storage facilities, as I'm in the storage industry, for this new fuel. So new builds or change of use of existing terminals and tanks. The LNG sector is definitely encouraging, and we have increased LNG traffic in our region, posing opportunities for us to develop new storage facilities for LNG and our partners. Moving into 2021, as mentioned, will be a year of transformation in our industry, both in the larger energy landscape as well as within our organizations. Opportunities are abound for those who are willing to take hold and adapt to the new changes and demand. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Welcome, Mike Muller, head of Vitol in Asia. Mike, welcome your outlook for the year ahead, please.
Thank you, Sean. Yes, indeed. 2020 was an unprecedented year, full of superlatives, and not for the right reasons. As we know, demand loss in energy and in oil specifically was close to 9 million barrels a day, or 9% of global world oil demand. And it was so unevenly distributed. The impact was so uneven. For aviation fuel, it was more than 50%, as we know. But for certain petrochemicals and for shipping fuel, it was negligible. Asia obviously weathered the virus much better than the West, thanks to strong government intervention and compliance in society. But this has come at a great price, not just job losses, but consider the impact on shipping, refining, petrochemicals, and investment, in particular in upstream. It has certainly made a big dent in our industry in terms of investment. And just take one look at the share price of various protagonists in our market to tell you the rest of the story there. This challenge was met by an unprecedented supply response by the group we now refer to as OPEC+, with Saudi Arabia and GCC partners, and of course Russia playing the lead roles in this. And the discipline with which they managed to respond to this challenge was admirable, and the cohesion amongst this OPEC+ club is the reason why the market has rebounded to the levels that we have not seen. We're now around $57 per barrel for Brent, levels that we have not seen before the virus really came home to roost, which is something like 10, 11 months ago. So we have amazing challenges ahead of us, because the world is now looking towards an exciting recovery in economic activity and hence energy demand of something like 2/3 of the losses that we suffered in 2020. And the world has never seen such a transition, and managing that without disruptions to supply and volatility will be very challenging. There's a very interesting overlay at the moment, because we have seen weather patterns globally, referred to as La Nina, which have given us very wet weather here in Singapore, as many of you will be aware, but more profoundly, very cold weather in the Northern Hemisphere. And this has manifested itself in unprecedented prices for power in markets like Japan, and hence unprecedented tightness in energy supplies such as LNG and coal. And these are all very, very unexpected phenomena. And I would not be surprised if 2021 holds more such surprises as we go through the demand rebound. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Mike. The year of surprises, another one. Oh no. Arif, please welcome your opening thoughts, CEO of PETRONAS Downstream.
Thank you, Sean. I think a lot has been said, and I mean, people talk about 2020 in multiple terms, unprecedented. It's a loss year, a great reset in a year of energy transition. A lot of countries are putting net zero carbon targets. Companies are doing so the same. So things that were going directionally in the right direction somehow get accelerated. And then we're seeing oversupply and demand disruption. So, I mean, I think in the year 2020, maybe the tankage business somehow actually meant it's a good year because then everybody would need tanks, right? Roger. So,
well, they apparently were all full, so that must be.
Yeah. So, and I guess the traders somehow had a great year for the year 2020. So, it's a mix here. But I guess given how the oil and gas business works, everybody needs to be in sync and complementary. Everybody got to survive this because the whole value chain is key in order to actually get the products from the ground to be refined, get into a ship, to a tank, and finally to the end consumers. So I think unprecedented in the sense that if you look at 2020 at the peak, we're seeing in Malaysia, for example, a demand disruption on the retail front of close to 60%. And aviation went down by 90%. So we've seen some recovery towards the end of the year. So we're now closer to 85%, 90% of what we saw in 2019. But, I mean, the thing is about 2021, I think recovery, especially in this region, will take a little bit more time because the vaccine, access to vaccine will not come through in this region as fast as maybe in the more advanced country. Malaysia will only get this vaccine maybe end of Feb, and we're talking about potentially by towards the end of the year before everybody gets vaccinated. So I think people are going to be very cautious. Economy, a lot of are being impacted. So people are not going to be spending. So demand will take some time to recover. And we've seen also the impact of this energy transition and the low margin, especially for refining, that some refiners are just not able to sustain. We've going to be seeing potentially maybe 1 million barrels per day disappear of refining capacity in this region. As much as that's impacting the people who's having the refineries, but it's also opened up opportunities for the new refiners from Middle East to have a home in Asia, for those who have access and refining capacity to actually put a product in the market. So I'm hopeful that at least I think towards the second half of the year that we should see hopefully margin improves. But I think just moving forward also just to have a refinery by itself will not be something that's sustainable. This whole integrated complex of refining and petrochemicals will have to be something that we need to focus on moving forward and really getting into very efficient operations, both from ability to manage costs and also emission emission into the atmosphere. So as a company, we've set targets of net carbon zero for 2050, but we also set another target of 30% of our revenue coming from our non-traditional business by 2030. So clearly there's a need for us to diversify and leveraging a lot more on digital and also capitalizing some of the new potential opportunities due to this energy transition. And as you can see, the spot prices of LNG, I'm hoping it to weather us for a while, for at least the first quarter. When if we've never seen the prices went up that fast to that high in a short period of time.
Well, if you take the calculation of the old-fashioned oil index for LNG, oil prices are going up to $300. So, you know, that's irrational exuberance perhaps, but it is a bizarre moment when LNG spot is where it is. Before we move to sort of open conversation with the panel, I'd like to give the audience an opportunity to voice some of their opinion with the first survey question of the day, which is to tackle some of the optimism perhaps, and what will offer the biggest headwind to Asia's economic recovery in 2021. Now, there might be 20 other things that could be put on the list here, but we've just picked out 4. What will offer the biggest headwind to Asia's economic recovery in 2021? Slow vaccine rollout, which was mentioned by 1 or 2 of the speakers. Nobody mentioned the weak dollar, quite often seen as a positive rather than a negative. But of course, a lot of exporting out of Asia into the rest of the world, and a weak dollar will not support the purchasing of expensive Asian goods. High oil and gas prices, as we mentioned, record high LNG oil prices now today trading at $57 a barrel, which is great if you're in that side of the trade. And of course, geopolitics, which continues to be one of the wild cards that we're facing across the world every year, but perhaps at the moment it feels like it's getting a little bit accentuated. So please pick one of the 4 and vote. Give us your opinion of what could be the greatest headwind for the Asian economy's recovery this year, and submit your vote, and we'll get that survey result in a few minutes. Ms. Hoon, I'd like to come back to you and to put a little bit of meat on the bone, if you like, as to what cautiously optimistic actually means, in the sense that, does it have a percentage point, and how does the cautiously optimistic get tempered by the fact that, you know, the 2 hands clapping, right? Asia depends on export markets to the West, trading with the West, and yet while Asia has recovered, the West continues to be in a difficult place. So I'm wondering if you might give us a little bit meat on your bone. What do you mean by cautiously optimistic?
Thanks, Sean. I would say, if I could quote Mike, right? 2020 has been a year of surprises. I think none of us in the panel would say we are very optimistic about 2021, because I think 2021 will still be like what Roger said, it's a year of transition, it's a year of transformation, and it will be a year where there's still a lot of unknown factors as how it would go. I cite last year, 2020. In fact, for the shipping industry, the biggest disruption for us was the transition to low sulfur fuel. And we were working so hard, and we thought that is the one factor that will determine whether shipping industry will do well or not. And we managed to pull it through, transition of the low sulfur fuel, and boom, you know, March, April, this unseen virus, invisible virus came and disrupted all our plans. So my cautiously optimistic is, in the normal trajectory, if we are able to overcome the virus, then technically we are all optimistic. But the fact is that despite having a vaccine, it's still not the clear-cut solution, global solution for the whole world. There's the strain which is also mutating. There are also some unknown risks that we are not aware of. Therefore, how I would qualify as cautiously optimistic.
Mike, just to pick up on that, kind of factors that could impact oil demand. You talked about surprises in your opening comment. Clearly, one of the big surprises last year might have been Chinese oil demand remained so strong. I'm wondering, what do you think could most influence oil demand growth in Asia this year, and your outlook for China on that point?
The biggest single demand that needs to return is aviation fuel. People getting on planes, and that's why I just voted the vaccine button in your multiple choice question, because that is the really big one. And until there is a rollout, and until we have introduction of the inevitable, which is alongside your regular passport, you probably need a vaccination pass, this demand is not set to recover. And if you look at bookings for holidays in Europe, in the Americas, or in Asia, it's all flat on its back still, and this must change. And the rollout of the vaccine is inconceivably going to take until mid-year, and even then there will be great caution. Take Singapore's role as a hub for conventions and conferences and business travel. It's more of a transient port for tourism, although there's a lot of it, but conferences are one of the big lifebloods of Singapore. And we have this great event, the World Economic Forum, which we have been loaned by Davos, I guess, which will take place in mid-May. There's no doubt in my mind that's going to take place under great care, and it's already been put in the public domain by the government that visiting delegates will be kept under very close watch to ensure there's minimum touch points with the population, because there is a view that by May we will not be out of the woods yet. My great hope is that the big Singapore Oil and Gas Energy Conference, APEC, which takes place just before the Formula One race in late September, might be the first forum where we can convene again face to face, because by then it is likely that we'll have sufficient immunization or herd immunity, and a combination, of course, of people who've actually suffered and had the virus or who've been immunized. And that is my hope, but I do think it'll take until late Q3.
Let's bring the survey question, if we have the result, just to bring it up. So the slow vaccine rollout by far potentially presents the biggest headwind for Asia economic recovery. Arif, your thoughts on that result, and in particular, I would welcome some insight on how, if we do have a difficult recovery in Asia, how will you accommodate all of the increased refining capacity that's coming into the market, particularly in China?
Yeah, I mean, I voted also for the vaccine because I think the customer confidence, that it's safe to go out and go back to normal daily life. That's one. The other one is the ability for that to then spur the economy. Because if you look at what's happening today, the supply is not the issue. I mean, it's demand. Until real demand actually comes back, and real demand will only come back when there's confidence that people can actually go out, travels, and do their normal daily lives. So I think the short term what's happening in 2020, I mean, people capitalize on the low oil prices, for example, and fill up the storage and kept in, because it's always that we've seen in oil and gas that the price will not stay long. There will be recovery. So people do want to actually capture that opportunity. But it comes to a point when it comes to 2021, those tanks are going to be filled. I mean, then it's going to be actually utilized. So I would agree with Mike that airlines needs to fly. I mean, otherwise the economy will be confined to only within the country, within So and for a region like Asia, we are dependent on the region, not very much on the individual, like Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia. So the fact that I think recently we've signed the agreement, the RCEP, right? That essentially the drive is to open up the region. RCEP actually gives you access to 30% of the world population and 30% of the world economy. So it's one single largest region. But we can't call it region unless movement of trades and mobility can happen. So I think in that sense, I think the drive of balancing between life, what the government is trying to do against livelihood. So hopefully livelihood gets there once a vaccine is being rolled out, and people get back that confidence to go back to normal life. Until such time happens, I think it's going to be volatility in the market will be there. And as you can see today in the second wave, third wave of this COVID, Malaysia, for example, is back to full lockdown. Right? We see UK in a full lockdown. So this kind of phenomena of trying to open up and closing back and open up is not going to be sustainable to actually get to spur the economy. So I think that's why I think it's super critical that this vaccine do get rolled out and regain that confidence that people can go back to the normal life.
And on that particular point, just to come back to the sort of push you on the refining capacity. I mean, China in this cycle, in this moment, are going to add about 1.5 million barrels of capacity this year. Yet demand increase in Asia certainly will be struggling to meet that. Is China going to secure more and more market share, be the refining, the product supplier of Asia?
I think that the strength of China, because of the market size it has. So clearly, I mean, the refining capacity in China will probably have a slightly better advantage than, say, my new refineries coming up in Pengerang. But I think, but there's also going to be refineries that are going to be retired. I think there'll be a sweet spot where hopefully the price of the products allows you to have enough margin to actually operate. But I think like what we're trying to do in Pengerang is also not to be just dependent on the petroleum products. I think the demand for petrochemicals, there is a little bit of setback, but I believe that's going to be recovering. So integrated refineries, complex refineries will still be the winner. It's against some of the older refineries that's no longer as efficient as it can be. So we'll see new refineries like the Jazan refineries coming from Saudi. So I think it will take time. I don't think it's going to be, you're not going to see a great year for 2021. But I think you need to just, I guess, have the resilience to just get through this for a couple of years before you actually can see real demand coming in and pushing up the margins required for the refiners.
Okay, Roger, there was a talk, and certainly in this presentation, but also throughout last year, that those in the terminal storage business were having a great year. Contango delivered margins for everybody in that space. I'm wondering, what's your sort of reflection on 2020? Obviously, you're a builder of storage, and we saw in China, of course, the continuous development of more and more capacity. What does the legacy of 2020 feel like from a storage point of view, and what is the outlook, do you think, going forward?
Well, 2020, the opportunity was there. But as we all know, that tanks cannot be built within a few months. It takes us like
except in China, it seems.
Yeah, it's impossible for us to build all the infrastructure for the southern surge for contango and all that. So what happened is that, well, the conversion of tank products for storage, and we try to make it better, like increasing more value to those kind of rejuvenation and repairs, such as, for example, if you're down a tank, that you say, okay, we're going to value add by increasing another course where you increase the capacity of the tank, if the loading permits. So in that way, we are with a little bit of more work and the flexibility of the schedule, we could increase the capacity of the tank, the existing tank per se. But we can't build, like what Arif, you say, oh, it sounds like Rotary is having a boom here. It's not true. Because we can't build tanks in such a short period. And also the refiners and all the plant owners, right? They are on a shoestring budget. They are cutting our prices like crazy. So it's not that lucrative anyway.
Where does that impact from the point of view of coming out of 2020 into 21? I know in Singapore, there's obviously moving away from crude oil storage, very much products. Where does the trend go on that from your point of view, product storage, new tankage versus crude oil in Asia?
Yeah, in Singapore, I've spoken about this, that there will be no more new tanks to be built because our Singapore government do not encourage any terminals anymore, unless those were related specifically to any petrochemical complex. So no new tanks in Singapore, only the surrounding neighboring countries where we have new projects, places like Myanmar or Vietnam, there are new opportunities. But in Singapore, no more new tanks. So the conversion part of it, right? Instead of crude, they are converting to fuel, which is not so, fuel oil, that is not so terrible from class 1 to class 3. So that is easier. But if for conversion to products, then it will be a different story altogether. So lots of, we have set up a department called TRR, Tank Rejuvenation and Repairs, because this is a little bit busy because there are a lot of repair works. And most of the tanks in Singapore, fortunately or unfortunately for some, are very old, 30 to 50 years, and they need to be rejuvenated. That's why we're keeping ourselves quite busy. But I must give compliments to the Singapore government. All of us will lose. I think all the enterprises are losing money, but the government, heavy subsidy from the government has helped us pull through this year and ready for the transition of 2021.
Well, I did hear the Prime Minister on TV over the weekend telling everybody not to get too dependent on that it's not going to last forever, as it will not last forever in the many countries where it exists. Let's bring up our second survey question and sort of blow out this a little bit from the point of view of the time frame. Do you agree with Goldman Sachs that we are on the cusp of a new commodity super cycle? We're seeing right across the spectrum of commodities, whether copper, metals, obviously now oil, nearly $60, LNG through the roof and beyond, agriculture as well. The last time we saw a super cycle of scale in the noughties was a boom for Asia. It boomed on the back of Asia, and Singapore obviously did mightily well on that. So are we on the cusp of that happening again? Beyond the vaccine, let's imagine that the second half of this year does indeed. But even before then, the commodity prices are moving on trajectories beyond the normal. So that's the question. Do you agree with Goldman Sachs that we are on the cusp of another commodity super cycle? Hoon, in Asia today, there is a lot of changes that were pre-existing before COVID and perhaps may, like other things, get accelerated. I'm wondering from a Singapore point of view, from the ports of Singapore, what you might identify falls into that category. We're seeing, for example, a lot of manufacturing move out of China into Vietnam, into Indonesia, perhaps into Bangladesh. I'm wondering how does that affect trade patterns? How does it affect Singapore? But what are the accelerated elements coming through COVID that are worth taking note of in 2021?
Maybe I could share some perspective from the shipping side of the house, because when we were looking, because we hear quite a fair bit on the demand for the energy and the oil side. Actually, during this COVID, as ships carry 80% of the global trade, we did see a down cycle during second quarter of 2020. But when it comes to container shipping, if you ask any ship liners now, they're in the best of the year since 2005. The demand actually went up from the US and Europe market, and the Trans-Pacific route now is one of the most lucrative. The freight rate can go up to 3, 4, 5, and I heard recently could go up as high as 7 times the usual rate. That's the ship liner is willing to go.
The super cycle's already with us, is it?
On the shipping side, container side. When we
they're carrying something, right? They're carrying.
Yes, they're carrying something. The rates is so high that they are willing to do a single trip to the US and come back with empty containers. So there is a shortage of containers now in the market for various reasons, because of the trade imbalance initially, and then the rebounds back after the lockdown of the situation. And also for the fact that I would say that in the market now, when it comes to the supply of containers and ships, it remains relatively constant. We don't see a huge surge in the supply of container that comes in. So that's on the container business. And we do expect that the business continues to remain relatively well until first quarter, second quarter next year. Now, tanker business, maybe because of what Roger is saying, that refineries and tanks takes time to build. So the tanker business was doing very well in the first half of the year when they were being used to store the extra oil that could not be pumped into the tanks. I think it took a little bit of a slight downturn in the last quarter, and we're just waiting to see how it could affect the tankers moving forward. The bulk side is not as, of course, not as attractive as before. So in terms of optimism level, definitely on the container shipping side is booming. It's booming, and we expect it at least to last till first quarter of this year, if not second quarter. Yeah. On your question on what do we see as shifts? So you are right. There would be, in terms of the global supply chain, there will be relocation. There will be diversification of where you can get your products. Shipping routes are adjusting as well. So now we see Trans-Pacific route being very attractive. Intra-ASEAN, intra-regional routes don't pale behind. It's also growing. But what I would add here is actually similar to what's happening in the energy sector. Shipping is also in the transition phase. When it comes to both digitalization, how do you take this opportunity to synergize shipping with the global logistics and supply chain? It is largely an industry where it's quite, there are many different players, and it takes a lot to move the cargo from one place to another. So there is a lot of scope to digitalize the entire value chain. Then second is, of course, on the topic of decarbonization, because of IMO's 2050 and 2030 target. What is the future of shipping, which is still an unknown. So as a bunkering hub, we pay special attention to that. We are working with the shipping industry to see what could be a future ship, and therefore we get ourselves ready as the bunkering stop for these ships. So generally, to comment here. Yeah.
Thank you, Leon. Mike, oil prices have obviously increased quite significantly after a period of last year where they were stuck at about $40. Brent now knocking on the door of 60. What is that outlook from the point of view of the impact on Asia? There's a significant elevated price. Is Asia, the consumers of Asia, able for that level? Obviously, the weak dollar helps. I'm wondering, what do you think is putting price there, and will this trajectory continue through 2021?
That last sentence is asking me for a prediction, which is always very difficult, Sean. But
well, just a trajectory without a prediction, nonetheless. There's no reason why the trajectory would stop, I suppose.
The momentum is clearly up, and part of that super cycle question that you asked. And in the context of other commodities, oil is almost lagging a little. Of course, it's also up, but we must constantly remind ourselves that cycles have their ups and downs, and cycles are a function of many things: demand, policy, economic growth, shifting patterns, unexpected events like viruses, and not very importantly also political and geopolitical moves, which include stockpiling and building of strategic inventories. And there's a whole bunch of these factors at play, but the single biggest response to these cycles is investment. And we have seen a woeful absence of investment in the upstream space of our industry. And it's important to remind ourselves that the underlying picture, if you don't invest in an oil or gas field, is that this field depletes, and you don't serve to invest in enhanced recovery mechanisms or infill drilling or steam lifts or whatever these technologies are to prolong the life of an oil field. It declines at a typical rate of 5, 6, 7%. And because of this low price cycle and the poor results for upstream companies and integrated oil companies, that investment has been missing many tens of billions of dollars, which is going to hand a little bit more control to the OPEC Plus club, who are the sole reason that the price is now knocking on the door of 60, as you so nicely put it. So,
And so that drop in capex last year is already impacting the market, even though the physical delivery of those investments wouldn't be till next year or the year after.
it depends, Sean. The length of cycles depends on what type of upstream investment you're talking about. If you're looking at a typical deep water project off West Africa, US Gulf of Mexico, or off northwestern Borneo, you have a lead time of 4 or 5 years, and therefore the impact of that lack of investment or deferred investment decision will manifest itself in no oil from that project around 2028, 29 or something like that. But in the US shale, it's a much more prompt response pattern where you're talking months between decisions to invest and production, and it's still not weeks, it's definitely months. But a big factor there, if you have such short lead times, is it's almost like a manufacturing process, and you can hedge it. And in many cases, the lenders to these companies will demand that hedging takes place. And it's no surprise that we have the backwardation in the market now, which is a function directly of upstream producers in the shale domain being forced by their lenders to hedge in 2021 and 2022, pushing down the back end of the curve. So there have been days recently when the front of the market, the spot price we all see in the newspapers, has gone up from, let's just say, $55 to $56. But the 2023 oil price has actually gone down a little bit because that selling pressure is there. And they're saying, thank you very much. I've got $50 plus WTI now. That works for me. And therefore the response is more immediate in the shale. But the shale is not big enough to influence global demand changes. And as I said before, we lost nearly 9 million barrels a day in 2020 last year. We're expecting to regain in excess of 6 million barrels a day this year. And the overlay that I just spoke about is that there's been an underlying loss in production from traditional, older, aging oil production infrastructure, which means that the world is going to have to draw on more than the existing supply infrastructure to find that 6 million barrels a day. And that draw is going to come from spare capacity in the club of OPEC plus.
Okay, let's bring up our survey result on this question of the super cycle. Wow, overwhelmingly yes. The either optimism for the year ahead, or I mean, it does seem to be bedding in. Arif, given that survey result and also this potential cycle, how does a company like PETRONAS, a big oil and gas producer, position itself? You're nearly compelled to invest those capex dollars in order to be ready to take advantage of this opportunity.
Yeah, I think when we were in 2019, when we saw prices coming up, we thought there's some kind of normality. That because in investment that we're going to make, especially in the LNG or upstream, it's a multi-year investment. So you're gonna actually have a view of what the price would be, right? So, and it's getting more difficult because of the impact of 2020 and how bad it is in terms of the impact to the P&L. So at the same time, this whole drive towards energy transition, carbon tax, and financing community, under pressure to not support the oil, so-called the dirty industry. So, the cost of financing and the ability to actually draw some of these things. So people are getting more cautious. So I think even for us, we are very much investing a lot more in gas, because we believe whatever it is, gas would be the transition fossil fuel. But we are also moving towards solar and wind. We're putting about 5% of where our capex is into the renewables. But as you know, this business are not giving that kind of return that we're looking at. And they typically are not priced, they don't sell it in dollars. So, like it or not, we need to transition this. Another areas that we are going to be looking at heavily is also, like everybody else, is hydrogen. How do you make hydrogen available? So with all this, there is a competing, need for replenishment of the core revenue generator for us. But at the same time, that same amount of pool of money is required for us to start investing in new set of portfolios. So it's a constant struggle and balancing of this portfolio that currently we're facing. Given the, for example, the investment that we just recently made in Pengerang, to try to get that facility just above water and get it to be running. So I think there are many factors that's pulling things not necessarily in the same directions, overlaid by a lot of this energy transition and the need for cleaner alternative energy. Actually, a decision on a big investment requires the board to push for more level of more conservatism in terms of, you cannot say that oil price will be what people used to say, 60 going to 80 and potentially even $100. So what is that numbers? I mean, BP used to say now is what, 50, 55, right? So if that's the environment that we're looking at, and plus the carbon tax overlay on it, it's going to be very tough to find new production space for the upstream, except maybe in the Gulf. So I think it will be in a longer term tight, but at the same time, people are pushing for new alternative energy. So I think it will be a space that even for us, that we are looking, as I mentioned earlier, 30% of new revenues coming not necessarily from the oil and gas business that we're in.
Diversifying. And Roger, to you on that as well, from the point of view of planning, given that the last time this happened in Asia in the world, and it was transformative for Asia, is there sufficient investment going on in order to support the capacity required for the super cycle, in order for ultimately that China doesn't be the only one that participates in its benefit, I suppose?
I fully agree with Arif that there will be less investments. So from our side, we're always looking at higher productivity, mechanization, to make the capex, to lower the capex, to make it more efficient, to reduce the dollar sign for any investment. This will help people like PETRONAS or the rest of the oil majors to be more encouraged to go into projects. That's our business. But also the other way is that solar energy. But can we do a lot about solar energy? No, because China is the key player. We get all the panels from them, even worldwide. So we also participated, like what Arif said, we also try to diversify. We try to go into solar energy, but it is so difficult, so competitive. So when we look at all the situation like that, we're just thinking of how we could improve our productivity to help our customers or clients to reduce their costs. That is the only way that we can survive. And of course, also, to train other people, multi-skill them, combine all the resources, specialization. From Rotary side point of view, we try to reduce the cost by becoming more efficient. And the next thing is the logistics part of it. Well, we try to get into investment for depot terminal. Instead of terminal, but we go into depots to cut down the distribution cost from the business to the end user. So these are areas that we're gonna look at it and a shift of paradigm.
Okay, well, we need to wrap up the session now, and I just want to wrap up with one third final survey question, which is the old chestnut. What will be the average price of Brent crude oil in 2021? The question that Mike Muller never wants to answer, but inevitably we all have our own opinions on. But just from the point of view of what you think will be the average price of crude oil, at least what will be the closest for this year, Last year, we would have never put 70 into the choice box. So consider that progress. Average price in 2020, what will it be? Tough one between one or two choices, perhaps. I want to conclude this session, this Aramco Trading New Silk Road CEO of the Year Award session, by inviting Mike Muller, the head of Vitol in Asia, to make the introduction of the award category for ports. Mike?
Thank you very much. It is my pleasure to introduce the winner of the 2020 Aramco Trading New Silk Road CEO of the Year Award in the category of ports. This award goes to Ms. Quah, Hoon. Congratulations. Chief Executive, Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore. A few words. Ms. Quah joined the MPA as CEO designate in November 2018 and took the reins effectively January 1st, 2019. So two full years now. Prior to this, she was chief editor of Channel News Asia, which many of you will recognize as Singapore's most accomplished and recognized TV business news channel and part of MediaCorp. Ms. Quah brings to the job more than 12 years of service in the public sector, where she was instrumental in economic policy making and as well as environmental and social policies, which included negotiating the US-Singapore Free Trade Agreement, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and being a member of the National Population Secretariat. These are just a few reasons why she was awarded the Public Administration Silver Medal back in 2017. Allow me to go back a little further in Ms. Quah's academic grounding, as it's a wonderfully multinational trio of degrees. Hoon holds an MBA from IMD Business School in Switzerland. She earned a master's in economics from University of Pantheon-Sorbonne in Paris, of course, and a degree in psychology from the University of Southern Queensland, which must have been a very nice phase of her life. A few comments on the MPA in 2020. Under the capable leadership of Ms. Quah, Singapore's MPA has managed challenges presented by COVID-19 both efficiently and importantly, safely. As you will know, Singapore is by far the world's busiest port. Despite the turndown in world trade, bunker fuel sales, as she mentioned earlier in Singapore, continue to surge beyond 2019 levels. We don't have the December data just yet, but at 45.5 million metric tons for the January to November 2020 period, that's up a whopping 6% on 2019. And we must remind ourselves, Singapore's bunker fuel consumption is about 1% of global oil demand. This is no small part attributable to the world-class standards introduced by Singapore's MPA to assure bunker fueling ship owners that the quality of fuel supplied is always going to be on spec. And the MPA is now inviting applications for 2 further licenses to supply LNG as a bunker fuel, evidence of a drive to be at the forefront of emissions reduction in the maritime sector. So while many other countries felt compelled to impose travel restrictions, Ms. Quah, in her leadership role at the MPA, implemented well-considered, effective crew change procedures, thereby providing respite to crews and ship owners globally, and also helping contain COVID in a country which had effectively closed its airport to not just tourists and business people, as I said before, but also to foreign workers. In summary, Singapore struck what I think is the right balance to keep global shipping and goods going, keeping essential services such as marine attendances and bunkering running smoothly with great clarity of direction and no disruption to trade. For this, our industry owes Ms. Quah and her organization a debt of gratitude. So let me conclude by saying congratulations, Ms. Quah. You are a very deserving recipient of this year's award in the ports category. I do hope you will find space on your already very busy mantelpiece or award cabinet for the physical award Gulf Intelligence will be sending you. Many congratulations.
Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you for the very, very kind words to myself and also to the MPA. Really thank you to the Gulf Intelligence for presenting me with this Aramco Trading New Silk Road CEO of the Year Award 2020. It's really an honor to be receiving this award. I'm told I have to show the award on screen.
You have it. Great.
It's sent by ship, I think. Second, I think I would like to really attribute this award to the team in the Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore. Many of us are working tirelessly behind the scene to try to keep the port going. And of course, our tripartite partners in both the industry and the unions to keep the port going. And during this period, what we realized is that there was a lot of collaboration that we have with a lot of international partners as well, whether it's the IMO, International Maritime Organization, with the unions, ITF, IMAC, etc. And we are able to come together to come up with a solution and to work through the processes, for example, in crew change with them. So third, I would just like to reiterate Singapore's commitment to keep our port open to seaborne trade during this current pandemic. and keep the global supply chain going. We'll also try to seize this opportunity, as what Mike mentioned, to reinvent and transform ourselves, especially in the areas of digitalization, decarbonization. LNG is definitely the way to go for us, at least in the transition in the next few years. And we're going to try to develop Singapore into an LNG hub. On the shipping side, we want to attract ships who are going to be filled with LNG in our port. And we'll continue to work with international partners to position the maritime industry forward and be even more resilient than now. So once again, thank you so much for to the Gulf for Intelligence for this award. Together with my team in MPA, we'll continue to work with our friends and partners. We have gone through very difficult times in 2020, and I'm sure many of us wish to see really good years of recovery in 2021 and beyond. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you and congratulations, Lê Hoon. As Mike says, much deserved. Singapore Port is the envy of the world, and I know Dubai and the region here aspires to meet the standards that you've set for the industry. Let me just wrap up by giving the results of this survey question on where will the price of oil be in the coming year. Close to $60, not too many of us banging up to 70, and 50 still claiming a place at the table. Thank you, Arif. Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Mike. And Ms. Lê Hoon, thank you very much for your participation and engagement in this first virtual UAE Energy Forum.